Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar from MBS on the changing landscape of CPD. We recently published a report titled just that, and what we're going to do is give you an overview of that report today, and I'm going to be joined by some colleagues who I'll note in a moment. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. All attendees' microphones are muted to enhance the audio capabilities through the webinar. All questions will be recorded and we'll follow up these after the webinar. So if you've got anything you'd like to ask, please just drop them in the Q&A and one of the team will be more than happy to drop you a note afterwards. And if you're interested in anything that you've seen today or you'd like to know more, please feel free to visit thembs.com or drop us an email at info@thembs.com and somebody will get back to you. Your speakers for today are myself. My name's Lee Jones. I'm the head of manufacturer solutions at MBS. And also joining me is my colleague, David Bain, who's the research manager, who's going to be giving us an overview of the report and the findings. And we'll also be joined by Joni Tyler, who's the head of CPD at the RIBA, and Fraser Streatfield, who's an associate partner at Pilbrow Partners, and he's going to be joining the panel session to give the architect's view of CPD receipt. So should make for a great webinar. I hope you enjoy it. What we're going to cover, I'm going to give a quick intro as to who MBS are for anybody that may be new to us, and a quick overview of the RIBA CPD. Should only be a few minutes long, and then we'll get straight into the actual content itself, where David will deliver the key findings from the report, and then we'll open up to the panel, and we'll be asking a lot of questions and hopefully bringing some interesting dialogue. For anybody that's interested in who MBS are, MBS are part of the Big Factor Group, who are a Nordic technology company. In the UK, MBS is operating alongside our sister company, Glenigan. We're both part of the group. There's a lot of development going on there between the two businesses to provide more valuable insights to manufacturers. But Big Factor themselves have a lot of different technology companies in the construction sector, similarly to MBS and Glenigan, all around the world. A very large presence in the Nordics and mainland Europe, but also operate in Southeast Asia, North America, Canada, and Australia as well. So there's a lot of reach there, and we're trying to improve the industry step by step with the things that we're doing. MBS itself has been around for the past 50 years. It was originally introduced in the early 70s and set up actually by some key members of the RIBA to standardize specification. National Building Specification, which is what MBS stands for today, is the de facto platform for anybody that's writing construction specification. We're used by a multitude of different professionals to actually write specifications, from architects to contractors, consultants, engineers, etc. And we represent a lot of manufacturers to help them get their products, materials, and systems specified. Just a quick note as well, and a little bit of news. MBS is also a carbon neutral business. We've recently been awarded carbon neutral status by a UCAS accredited third body, and that's across all of our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We've achieved a 56% reduction in our emissions since we began measuring in our base year of 2019, and we've been investing heavily in the residual ones in regards to reforestation to improve the local environments around the northeast where our office is based, but also in carbon reduction schemes internationally as well. So a great thing that we're proud of, and the platforms themselves are helping specifiers and manufacturers to improve the sustainable outcomes in the built environment. So I'm going to give you a quick intro to CPD. For anybody that's more than familiar with CPD, this is not trying to get anybody to learn how to suck eggs, but we do have quite a varied number of listeners, and some of you might be new to CPD. So a very, very quick overview from me as to what this is. CPD is continual professional development, and it's something that occurs in many different disciplines and professions, and not just in the construction sector. But in the construction sector itself, particularly when it comes to architects and architectural practices, continual professional development is something that has to be done to attain chartered status. The RIBA is the body that oversees the architecture profession in the UK, and they're a global membership body that drive excellence in architecture. The CPD content that we're going to be talking about today quite a lot and primarily is the CPD that's actually assessed by the RIBA, and it's a very trusted way for specifiers to actually know that the content that they're going to be delivered is going to be of the high standards. CPD itself has to be taken across 10 different sections of the RIBA core curriculum. As you can see on the screen here, from 1 through to 10, these cover anything from social purpose right through to design, construction and technology. Some of these areas of the core curriculum are having a lot more CPD added to them now, particularly with the changes in the industry that are going on, particularly around building safety and sustainability. So there's a lot of scope there for manufacturers to actually assist the specification community and deliver meaningful CPD with content that they really need to be taking on board and listening to. The RIBA CPD Providers Network is a great network for manufacturers to sign up to. We host events throughout the year where people can come and listen to the latest updates on the industry themselves, but also the opportunity to go and deliver CPD at certain events to the architectural community. Coincidentally, as I mentioned, just CPD is a mandatory requirement for every architect in the UK. They have to achieve a minimum of 35 hours a year to gain a minimum of 100 points. And for RIBA delivered CPD, this offers a double point score for them. So it's a very attractive thing to look for. And that's purely based on the fact that the content is known to be of the highest standard. For any manufacturers that deliver RIBA CPD, as part of your subscription, you get access to the RIBA CPD logos, and you can use that on email banners, business cards, etc. It's a great way to begin to build relationships and let it known to the architectural community that you've got some key messages that they could listen to. And then lastly, but not least, 76% of specifiers, and this is from an old report, it's likely increased now, and hopefully David will touch on this. I believe that CPD material, it's important that this is assessed by the RIBA. So they aren't going to be sitting there and listening to a big sales pitch. It's got to be educational, and it'll help them build that trust and relationship up with the manufacturers. So that was a very quick overview. If you've got any more questions on that, please feel free to drop us a note. We're more than happy to answer those after the webinar. But without further ado, I think it would be great to pass over to my colleague, David, and David is going to take us through the findings of the latest report. So David, over to you.
Thanks, Lee. Hello, I'm David Bain, and I'm going to take you through the findings of this year's CPD survey. So Lee's kind of done a good introduction to CPD, so I won't dwell on this, but CPD is clearly an important aspect of learning for many professions and obligatory for RIBA members. So designers and specifiers value it to keep themselves up to date, and past research that we've done has shown that 84% use CPD to research new products or technology for future projects. So with this survey, we're going to talk about CPD generally, but also focus in on specifiers and designers' view of the RIBA CPD Providers Network. So we conduct this research every 2 years with designers and specifiers. This year we surveyed 390 designers and specifiers, including architects and others, in Q1. And for every response that we received, we donated £1 to charity Crash. So that's £390 towards their good causes. In the survey, we asked how people prefer to undertake CPD, their views about the network itself, and also what they'd like to see in future CPD delivery. This was clearly an unusual year for the survey, as people would need to include their experience of doing CPD throughout the pandemic. And we'll talk a bit about sort of what that means and the implications of that as we go through. So just under half of the people that took part in the survey were architects, and there were a range of other professionals, so designers and specifiers in particular, such as different types of engineer, surveyors, architectural technologists, but also a range of other people working in the industry. So we've got quite a kind of range of views from a whole spectrum of built environment professionals. 44% were RIBA members, and most of those were chartered, and about half were not members of the RIBA. The full spectrum of age and experience was represented, from those at the beginning of their careers to those at the end. But the largest groups were those in the middle, so people kind of aged between 35 and sort of 64 who've been working in the profession and developed some experience over that time. We had a range of organisation sizes represented, from micro practices of 1 to 2 people to those with multiple offices and with hundreds of professionals. So, how do specifiers want to carry out CPD? So our past research has shown that architects and other specifiers are keen to carry out research in a variety of ways. So many value the experience of being in the same place as presenters and colleagues where good discussions can take place, but others have said that formats like online videos and webinars can more easily be accessed by people if they're in remote areas or in a small practice where it's less easy to invite a manufacturer in to do a presentation, or just people who are really busy who find it hard to travel. The pandemic has led to many providers creating digital forms of CPD, and we now see that almost all specifiers, 91%, carry out CPD in this way, while just half do in person, or 47% to be precise. 35% have actually said that they only do digital forms of CPD at the moment. But clearly the last 2 years has been really unusual. So what is likely to happen in the future? So we asked people how they prefer to do CPD over the next year or two. So most want to do a mixture of CPD formats. At the moment, we're seeing that webinars are the most popular format. So 95% name at least one form of digital CPD as one of their preferences, with 81% specifically citing on-demand webinars. They can watch when they want, although almost as many, 77%, citing those that are delivered live. This is an increase on 2019 when we last did the survey, with webinars overtaking in-person seminars as the single most popular format. But over 3/4 still intend doing some form of in-person CPD. 78% favoured at least one type of in-person CPD. So in-person seminars are still very much a key part of the mix. Interestingly, printed material still has a place. Almost half still like to access CPD in this way. So let's look at some of the comments that people made in the survey. So many views in favour of both digital and in-person formats, and we're showing some of those here to represent those sort of different viewpoints on these different types of CPD. So for digital, the flexibility has made it much more accessible to some, making it less time consuming and location being less of a barrier. There are also signs that those aged 35 to 54 who are more likely to be in senior positions find digital CPD more appealing as it's easier to fit around their busy schedules. However, with digital, people can try and multitask and therefore not learn as effectively. And the discussion, when everyone is in the same physical space, is still valued. Younger professionals are particularly keen to do in-person CPD, as well as doing digital alongside. So we're seeing that some people and organisations are actively coming back to in-person events. So what makes it difficult for people to do CPD? So we've seen that timing, cost, and location have consistently been the biggest barriers over the time we've been doing the survey. These are still significant, although there are signs that a lack of time is perhaps at a turning point. There's been a slight fall this time round in the number of people citing it as a barrier, from 89% to 85%, saying that time could be a significant or can be a barrier. Timing can also be a barrier to 85%, but only 18% say it's a significant one. CPD from the providers network is free, but cost is likely to include travel and time away from fee-earning work. So when people are answering the question about cost, it's quite likely they're factoring in those things as well. Hence the fact that it is cited as being quite a significant barrier. Location continues to be a barrier for many. So there are some early signs that digital formats may be helping to reduce barriers, and there are some comments about that in the survey as well. But this hasn't manifested itself in a large reduction just yet. It is important that CPD is interesting and relevant. This has become a significant barrier in recent years, with 78% saying it can be a barrier and 24% a significant one. In terms of COVID, 44% do cite concerns about that, but only 15% say it's a significant barrier. So the COVID kind of issue does appear to be sort of gradually going away as a significant problem in preventing people from doing in-person CPD. And in fact, 39% say lack of in-person CPD is a barrier. So that does show that there are a lot of people who are wanting to kind of come back to those in-person events. So how long should CPD be? Well, just over half, 55%, prefer in-person seminars to be between 30 and 60 minutes. And nearly 2/3 prefer webinars to be the same duration, and actually almost a fifth would like them to be less than half an hour. And 63% prefer sort of site and factory visits to be between 1 and 2 hours. So whilst there are a range of preferences for these different things in terms of duration, there does appear to be a bit of a sweet spot, perhaps depending on exactly what the product is and exactly what the presentation or CPD material might contain, but a bit of a sweet spot for up to an hour for in-person seminars, 30 minutes or maybe a little bit longer for webinars, and about 90 minutes for site visits. So perhaps a little bit of a guide as to what's going to work well and be most attractive to people. And is lunchtime still the best time for CPD? Well, we can see here that 54% prefer lunchtime for in-person seminars, and almost as many prefer lunchtime for webinars too. When it comes to site and factory visits, perhaps because people expect to spend a bit longer doing those and are more likely to be willing to block out a bigger part of their day, 52% actually prefer a morning timing for those. So the answer to the question would appear to be yes, lunchtime is still the best time for certainly webinar and seminar-based CPD. In terms of picking morning versus afternoon for those, there's not much in it, maybe slight preference for mornings. So we understand how specifiers would like to access CPD in terms of things like the format, duration, timing, those kinds of things. But there's a lot of CPD and training out there. How can you reach specifiers to share your CPD? The CPD Providers Network from the RIBA and MBS is an effective way of doing this. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that now. So CPD delivered by members of the RIBA CPD Providers Network is a great way to learn about different products and technologies. It's well recognized. So we can see here that 85% of specifiers are aware of the logo. 98%, so virtually all architects are familiar with the logo. Some who recognize the logo might not consciously be aware of what the network is, but most are. So 77% say they are aware of the network, and again, nearly all architects, 95%. But it is pretty well recognized among even the non-architectural professions. So 75% of those in those other professions like engineers and surveyors, landscape architects are aware of the network. And most specifiers who know about the network have access to CPD delivered by its members, 86%. And that rises to 90% for architects. It's viewed as professional, 75% saying CPD delivered through the network is professional, credible, and high quality. The majority also feel it's relevant, although some feel there could be some improvements there. It is important that providers strike a balance between providing unbiased content and showcasing the benefits of their product. So clearly the CPD must be of educational value in itself. It cannot just be a sales pitch. Some specifiers don't always feel that balance is quite right. So that's an area where it's really important to look at and make sure that that balance is achieved. But this is where the RIBA assessment comes in. So the RIBA assessment of the CPD material helps to maintain the professional, high quality and credible CPD that specifiers have come to expect. The RIBA accreditation is important to them. 3/4 say so, and 34% say it's very important. The assessment is important to all disciplines, but particularly for those in architectural roles, where 8 out of 10 or more value it. So why is it so important? Well, specifiers believe that it helps to ensure the high quality, in particular, they've come to expect, but also they're likely to trust it, which is increasingly important in the construction industry at the moment. So they're likely to be receptive to undertaking CPD that is delivered by network members. And assuming that the CPD meets expectations, if specifiers trust the CPD, perhaps that might bode well for future relationships between suppliers and the designers and specifiers and the products that are provided. So it could be a good start to a long-term relationship that benefits both parties. In terms of CPD that's delivered through the network, webinars and in-person seminars are the most popular ways of accessing CPD, with 88% having accessed webinars delivered by members and 67% in-person seminars. Other types of CPD can be assessed and delivered via the network. And also specifiers can use channels provided by MBS and the RIBA. So articles and videos on RIBA-CPD.com, the RIBA CPD Showcase newsletter and roadshows as well, which can also be delivered in person, but online too, with the new online roadshows, the RIBA CPD Provider Hour, which has been really well received in the survey. In terms of quality ratings, the vast majority, 87%, rate both online and in-person seminars as good or very good. People frequently recommend CPDs delivered by network members to others, as shown in these comments here. So how can CPD help to build and maintain a relationship with people that are designing buildings and specifying products? Well, because you're providing something of value to designers and specifiers, CPD is a great way to open doors and start a mutually beneficial relationship. It can also be a good way to reconnect with design professionals, perhaps if you recently updated your CPD material. So the CPD must provide educational value, as we've said, but if done well, architects and other specifiers who engage in it will often go on to contact the provider of the CPD. Almost 2/3 say they have specified a supplier's products after experiencing their CPD. This increases to almost 70% among the more experienced specifiers that have completed our survey. 60% asked for more information, over half received technical support, and 36% downloaded one or more of the provider's BIM objects. This could be the start of an ongoing relationship where specifiers return to the supplier's products for future projects. So once your product has been specified, then you have further opportunities to demonstrate the effectiveness of your technical support and the performance of the product itself. So if this proves successful, it can lead to that long-term relationship where specifiers will continue to specify your products. But there are other things that designers and specifiers value in the CPD that may lead them to ask you back. So one of these things is the amount of, thinking about the amount of regulatory and technical product information that architects and others need to keep up to date with. Any help there is really welcome. So we can see here that they would welcome the provision of supporting documentation that provides technical information. So 88% would like that. Guidance for specifying products, 78% would welcome that. Certification information and health and safety related information. So those in technical roles, like architectural technologists, are particularly likely to value that, to have that kind of information that's provided during or after the CPD. In terms of content, the designers and specifiers value. They're keen to see CPD that helps them keep up to date with the best practice in design and specification for things like achieving net zero, and also to understand the implications of new legislation relating to things like building safety and accessibility. So where relevant, where providers can provide CPD relevant to their products that helps designers specify sustainably and safely, that's likely to be welcomed. And you can see that in some of the comments made on this slide. So just to kind of sum things up, what we can see is that CPD can be a key part of the specification marketing cycle. We've seen that CPD can and does provide a standalone benefit to the user and an effective way of raising awareness of products, but it can be integrated into your overall marketing strategy and form an essential part of this. So we developed the specification marketing cycle with six stages in a circular process that align to the RIBA plan of work and the steps the specifiers go through when specifying products. The cycle starts and ends with CPD. Such an effective means of making initial contact to raise awareness at stage 1 of the cycle, and then again at stage 6 to re-engage and maintain relationships. We also provide tools to support marketing activity at the other stages, MBS Source and Chorus. And you can visit our website or contact us if you'd like to find out more about those. And you can also download the full specification marketing cycle tools from our website, which contains more information and guidance and tips for marketing strategy and activities at every stage, basically using the kind of full promotional marketing mix and tools that are available. It's important to use the right blend of CPD formats to maximize the impact for each stage and to keep in sync with designers and specifiers' needs. So what we've kind of seen from this survey over the last 2 years, it's shown that the potential of digital to extend the reach to a wider audience and to provide CPD in a more flexible way is really valued by users of CPD. Many will not want to go back to exactly how it was before, but then there are many that still value that engagement of in-person learning. So providing that option remains really important. The best approach is likely to be a blend of the two, perhaps through hybrid sessions or offering the choice of both digital and in-person formats. So thank you for listening today. You can download the full report of this research by following the link here, and you can also find out more about the network using the information on this slide as well. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Lee now.
So thanks very much for that, David. Absolutely fascinating results and such a great looking presentation actually as well. I think some of the infographics were great, and hopefully the people listening to the webinar have found that useful, and it's things that they can use themselves. Moving on from that though, I'd like to introduce our panel, and we're going to go through some of the findings and some things that maybe aren't actually within the report as well, but all relating to CPD, and open up a discussion. So we've just heard from myself and David. So also joining us are Joni Tyler and Fraser Streatfield. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, guys, that'd be great. Joni, shall we go to you first, please?
Hi, I'm Joni Tyler. I'm head of CPD at the RIBA, and I'm responsible for CPD policy, strategy, compliance, curriculum, and accreditation, and have worked with NBS and in as many guises over many years, delivering the CPD providers network for you and for end users.
Thanks, Joni. And Fraser, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yep, that's fine. So I'm Fraser Streatfield. I'm an associate partner at Pilbrow Partners. I've worked at the company for about 5 years now. I'm involved in organising the CPDs that take place at the practice, reaching out to suppliers, manufacturers within the industry, as well as going on the RIBA CPD website and getting in touch with new people, bringing them in, getting to know them, getting to learn their products. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today to share my experience and in that area.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, so the report itself obviously has a lot of findings, I think, but the main sort of one that stuck out to me is that digital CPD seems to be really, really popular at the minute. I think one of the stats was that 91% of architects were choosing to learn that way now, as physical CPDs are taken by around half of those. I think this sort of poses two questions. I think the first one, Joni, I'd like to come to yourself on, if that's okay. For manufacturers that are already delivering CPD or considering delivering CPD, can they make these dual enabled? So by that, I mean, can they deliver these digitally and physically? And does this still count as one piece of CPD material?
Yeah, I thank you, Lee. You know, I'm surprised if people aren't already doing that, to be honest. I think that to backtrack a couple of years to March 2020, when we all went to that first lockdown and everybody started working from home, we worked together at RIBA and NBS to work with manufacturers to get them to pivot immediately to digital CPD, using the same content and delivering their content by Zoom like this, by Teams, by GoToWebinar, or even by Facebook events. So there were no reductions whatsoever in the rules for our members doing CPD throughout the pandemic. They still had access content. And what was really gratifying is that because so many manufacturers took the time to pivot immediately, even those who were not necessarily that comfortable with delivering digital CPD, we were able to provide content for RIBA members and for other specifiers, and manufacturers were still able to see their audiences in a live situation, as it were. So what happens is when you submit a piece of content or you've got an existing piece of content, you only have to tell us that you want to deliver it digitally as well as face-to-face. And presuming you're going to be delivering it in this in this kind of fashion by Teams, by Zooms, by any of these meeting platforms that didn't exist a few years ago, you're kind of getting two pieces of approved content for one, because not only are you able to deliver in multiple formats, which is something very few did before the pandemic. It's also listed on the RIBACPD.com twice. So it's listed as online CPD and it's listed as face-to-face CPD. So people can choose to look for what they want to face-to-face, but they can also, and they do in great numbers, search for the digital CPD they want as well. So it's a pretty simple matter. I think in the old days before the pandemic, probably when people thought about delivering digital CPD, they're thinking of having to do something really cumbersome. They're having to pay a third party to develop something for them. It was really difficult to see people in a live situation then to capture user details and so forth. But the delivery of everything in the pandemic has really changed. The way we work, the way we interact with each other, the way we access health services, but certainly the way we deliver and consume CPD as well. So I think that you should really be thinking of delivering it in both ways. I think there's no question that people still are increasingly wanting to go back to a face-to-face physical delivery situation again. And I personally think that those statistics are going to change over the months and over the years again, but that they also expect to be able to consume it in this manner as well. Just to say though that obviously that you have the live audience if you do it this way, and you have the scope for international reach, obviously, but don't forget that you might want to also have an on-demand option up your sleeve as well for those who really can't make it, or for those requests you might get in the Middle East in the middle of your night. So you're making the content available to people, and provided that's exactly the same content, we don't have to assess the new digital content. So you're getting two, and if you choose an on-demand, maybe even 3 pieces for the price of 1. So absolutely go for it. If you haven't already, if you email us at assess@riba.org at the RIBA, we can get that sorted for you and have it listed as digital immediately.
Brilliant. So yeah, I mean, increased exposure there, I think, is a great opportunity, and encourage manufacturers to do that. Fraser, from obviously your position as the person that receives the CPDs, what advice would you give to those considering going down a digital delivery route?
Yeah, and I think it's been touched on by both David and Joni that, because of the digital platforms that are available now, it is giving more accessibility to more people within different situations, wherever they are in the world. So I think just considering your digital audience is a good thing to do. you know, that CPD may be offered physically in the office, and if you do, I think it's just to keep in mind that you will likely have a digital audience there as well. So, you know, ensuring that there's a good camera available, you know, getting in touch with whoever you're going to go and present to, ensuring that there's a good microphone, a good camera, and if there isn't one, perhaps go along with one to ensure that people who are watching those digital CPDs online can do so just as effectively as those who are attending it in person. I think that's pretty much.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think it might be something that'd be quite easily overmissed. I know when I used to go out to different practices as a manufacturer, taking an extension cable that could adapt my laptop to different screens was an absolute must in your laptop bag. But yeah, it sounds like the microphone is probably joining alongside that now. So thanks very much.
I definitely say that if you're thinking of delivering in a hybrid fashion, that's something you probably need to rehearse and make very detailed arrangements with the practices on. So what I was talking about is the ability to deliver like this and to deliver in the practice. Hybrid is a really interesting idea as well, but make sure you've got the technical capabilities set up for that one. So you might want to practice about that one and think about it. Went to a hybrid event yesterday that kind of fell apart. So
there you go. So yeah, it's a practice.
Yes.
Being comfortable with those platforms as well, if I can just add, you know, obviously I think most people are familiar with Microsoft Teams, Zoom. In our practice, we go with Teams, and like you say, even when you're just going digital, there can be complications around having people being able to join the right platform. You know, some people have Teams already installed, but if you intend on presenting on Zoom, it's important to ensure that that software is already installed with your audience. Otherwise, you know, there's that last minute dash to ensure that everyone can jump online. So I agree with Joni. I think getting yourself prepared in time is important.
Yeah, really valid statements, I think. And if any manufacturers are listening that are considering this, maybe look at expanding your own platform that you use internally to the other ones, so you can cover all bases and check before you go and deliver this. So I think we've got some questions later coming down the line about timings, and I think that maybe all factors into that. If you've got to spend 10 minutes setting something up that people can't log into at the start, it's obviously going to eat into that slot. So yep, great advice there. Thank you very much. David, obviously you are behind all the vision and you get sight of all these statistics that we've been doing through these reports. Do you think this digital evolution is something that's going to continue to grow as normality, if there is such a thing, starts to return, or do you think it's going to start to revert back to how it was with more physical delivery?
Based on the research that we've done and what we're hearing, I think it will grow. I don't think we'll just revert back to how things were, personally. But I don't think I think digital evolution doesn't necessarily mean it'll all just be digital. I think that people want to blend, and I think they want choice. So digital provides the opportunity to deliver an experience CPD, so kind of both sides, with less associated resource, cost, and travel, depending on exactly what the CPD is and where it is. But you know, it does allow a provider to create the CPD once and then share it multiple times in lots of places across borders and so on. So, you know, a lot less travel time and resource time used to deliver it there. And if the architect or other professional accessing it isn't able to view it in their own office, then, you know, they don't have to drive or take a train or whatever, travel some distance to go and view it. So those things are clearly benefits of digital CPD. I think as well, it could provide possibly the option to tailor CPD as well. Some of the comments we sometimes receive from professionals are that it's not always pitched at the right level for them. So if you're early in your career, you might want CPD, which is perhaps, if there is such a thing, beginner's CPD, or something which is right for someone who's quite, you know, early in their career. But we often get comments from people who've been around for a long time. They have quite a lot of knowledge. They don't necessarily want to go back over all the, excuse me, the same stuff again. They might want to see something which is more advanced, maybe. So if there are ways of tailoring CPD in that kind of way, I think digital would allow people to view the one that's right for them. So there are obviously clearly advantages of digital, but I do think people will continue to value in-person CPD. I think people want a break from screens. They don't want to just spend their whole life on screens all the time. And we received comments like that in the survey of people talking about that. And I think as well, discussion and networking still does seem to work better in person. We can obviously have a discussion like we are now, and it is working pretty well. But I think there is something about in-person contact and that kind of rich discussion you can get at the end of a presentation when you're having a discussion with colleagues and with the presenter, which still works really well. So that's kind of the overall sort of take I've got on it at the moment. But I think that in terms of evolution, we should be looking to make the digital platforms work as well as possible for everybody. So continuing to make them better and work better and have a really good blend of both.
Thanks, David. So I think one thing I noticed, obviously, I'd mentioned about how visually it looked, and that I noted there was some great testimonials in there as to why face-to-face CPD should still be considered by practitioners. And going to Fraser first on this one, I think, could you give us some good example of when, as a recipient of CPD, you'd prefer a physical delivery? Is there any sort of areas where that would be preference?
Yeah, I think the physical CPDs, one good opportunity that tends to happen is that the manufacturer, suppliers, whoever's giving the presentation, has the opportunity to bring in a physical sample of something that they have in their inventory. And that's always well received, the opportunity to pass that around the room, for people to get hands-on, a tactile product that people can understand when somebody's talking about it. I find that does resonate quite well with the audience. And also, I think bringing in, you tend to find there's more energy in the CPDs and the presentations, because, like you say, I think it's been touched on, that interaction that can take place, and that conversation, that debate that can happen in the room tends to energize itself when people are physically present. I think I'm sure that those debates can certainly happen online. I've certainly been part of heated debates on the digital platforms, but I think there is certainly that way, that kind of conversation that happens in person. I think, just to go one step further, we've had some CPDs where the audience has been encouraged to actively participate, where you go away and you get a drawing board, and we all drop down ideas and thoughts, and that's presented to one another in sort of small teams. And I think bringing in a bit of activity into the CPDs can also be quite useful. Again, I imagine those things can extend to the digital world as well. And I know there's all sorts of useful apps out there that enable you to collaborate online, and I'm sure they're just as effective. Those are just some examples that I can think of.
Thanks. So yeah, CPDs that are involving physical material samples and activities. Yeah, that's great. I think, Joni, from your perspective, could you give us some examples that manufacturers maybe could use if they're proposing CPD sessions and they'd like to deliver that physically?
Well, I love hearing what Fraser said, because that's absolutely ideal. Even in before the pandemic, when people really break up their presentations to ask questions, and asking questions can perhaps also capture those people who might be fiddling on their phones at that time as well. But to ask questions, to draw, to brainstorm, to integrate some sort of a really quick quiz for which you might have a little prize for somebody, break it up in two, show a video in the middle of the presentation, something that we might have assessed and approved, but anything that will engender that physical interaction and the thing that, even with the best technology in the world, you're not necessarily going to replicate. I think necessarily this isn't so much a technique, but also being there physically face to face is a really great opportunity for you after the end of the approved presentation to discuss the practices projects, to collect details, to have those more sort of detailed non-CPD one-on-one discussions about what the practice is working on and the likelihood for their work in the future as well. But remember also, in terms of presenting content physically, that we are also delivering the RIBA CPD Roadshow program now physically as well. So that's another opportunity. And certainly for those people who are time poor, even having something in the practice or going to a local roadshow might work really well. But another thing that lots of particularly interiors products have always been really good about doing is using their showrooms to invite people in to witness their approved CPD presentation. And Raqqa, it remains a really good example of that. The building was designed by Zaha Hadid, so they integrate a RIBA-approved Zaha Hadid tour into the invitation, provide refreshments, do their other approved RIBA CPD as well, and make it really worthwhile for people. And another thing you can consider as well is if you've got a showroom, you might invite one or two compatible CPD providers with non-competitive projects to come in as well, to do your own mini CPD roadshow, make it worthwhile, give people drinks. Yearly Clerkenwell Design Week is a perfect opportunity for that sort of thing. When you've got, I mean, think every time I walk in Clerkenwell, I'm amazed at how many of our CPD providers have offices there. So you can organize a crawl between your showrooms, give people a stamp passport maybe, and have a prize at the end. It's just a thought, but it'd be fun to organize.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to consider. I mean, I can't remember what the stat was, but in Clerkenwell, that you might know this, Joni, it was something around 40% of all UK architects are based in that area, aren't they? So I
wouldn't be surprised.
It's great, and I think a lot of the manufacturers that we work with do have showrooms in that area, so use them. Yeah, it's a great suggestion.
And work with each other. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. Focused quite a lot on actually delivering CPD as a presentation now, but there's obviously not just that route for this. There's things like printed material or white papers, etc., which I think can sometimes get overlooked by the manufacturers themselves. On that note, Joni, what types of documents, papers, etc., could a manufacturer submit in this area, and how many can they submit under a standard subscription, etc.? Is this the same as presentations or something entirely?
Well, the great thing is that they generally count as half a presentation. So if you're talking about something like a CPD article or a white paper or a quick piece of thought leadership or a blog, they too count as one seminar. So you're sneaking in an extra assessment for that. But pretty much anything that people can learn from, as long as it's presented in a really non-commercial way, and as long as it answers some fundamental questions and advances people's learning, can be treated as CPD of that sort. I think that we've got in the providers network right now, we've got a couple of companies who are doing regular blogs, and these blogs are entirely about are really, I guess, to use the only phrase I can think of, they're more academic than commercial. They really explore societal issues or societal concerns in a really generic, thought-provoking way, and they're entirely uncommercial. Urban Front Doors is an example of one of those who's doing it. We've assessed some technical content from the Finishes and Interiors Association, quick technical papers. And if you look at RIBACPD.com, where all CPD Providers Network content is listed that's approved, you'll see that there's an option for CPD articles as well. So you can take some of your technical information in maybe your approved RIBA CPD, distill it down into the article template, which we can arrange for you to get if you email assess@riba.org. And then not only do you have the piece of content that people can read, because that's what they want, but it's also listed, hosted online at RIBACPD.com. So you're really increasing your chance of search engine optimization and reaching your target audience with something easily consumable. And that's probably much easier for you to put together than a 40-minute PowerPoint presentation, particularly if you're trying to use up all your CPD allocations, or maybe you want to start in a more gentle way as well if you're new to the providers network. And finally, there's one company based in Denmark who the only piece of CPD they've ever had assessed is their magazine subscription on lighting, which is really interesting. But they keep renewing, and the magazine's still listed. So if you have any questions or want to explore anything, again, get in touch with us and we're happy to have that conversation with you.
Thanks very much, Joni. So yeah, I think moving on from this, lunchtime CPD delivery, 54% of people had said that that's something that they were looking for. Other than the obvious factor that lunchtime is usually 30 to 60 minutes long, are there any other considerations such as, I don't know, attention or maybe data overloading with people that we need to consider on this? And I think I'd like to point this one to Fraser and then David, if that's possible.
Yeah, no, I think, and I think Joni touched on this in one of her previous answers, where, you know, breaking up the presentation is always a good idea. Yeah, I think, you know, encouraging perhaps questions during presentation can be useful if managed. You know, you don't want it to overwhelm the presentation, otherwise it can go on for much longer than anticipated, or you might not be able to cover all your content. But certainly just having the odd question during the presentation certainly helps to engage the audience. I think, as we spoke about before, activities can be good, even if they're rounded off at the end, where perhaps you save 15, 20 minutes at the end of the presentation for a bit of participation. That certainly helps gauge the room. I think that's all I can think of right now. But yeah, certainly breaking up the presentation does certainly help.
Sure. David, any thoughts from you on that?
I mean, yeah, I think they would kind of support what Fraser's saying. Really, I think that you know, maintaining attention for a lot longer than an hour, you know, can be quite difficult without a break, I think. In fact, actually, you know, some of the research we did, you know, before this latest survey, before the pandemic, there was a lot of interest in micro learning, for instance, and having kind of quite short bursts of CPD, which people could easily fit into their working day. So, you know, they could sort of concentrate, but also they could fit it in more easily, maybe when they're traveling, if it's digital, or you know, in between meetings at lunchtimes, that kind of thing. It just seems like a kind of reasonable time. Half an hour or so seems a reasonable time to take out of the working day, whether that's at lunchtime or at other times. It's, you know, a bit like a short meeting. If it's more than that, it's more difficult, I think, for people to spend that amount of time, you know, away from work. But it does seem to work quite well with it being lunchtime, when people, you know, probably are expecting to have a bit of a break from their normal work, if you like. So it kind of does seem to make sense.
Can I interject something? If you thought about putting together a thought leadership podcast, podcasts are generally about a half hour. Could be a piece of micro learning, and it's something I listen to podcasts on my commute all the time, and it would be a really great way for people to consume some of your content, for you to do something that, well, I say it's easy. It may be less easy for somebody who's never done a podcast before, but it's a possibility and something to think about.
Thanks very much, Joni. And yeah, thanks, David and Fraser. I think they're all valid points. The engagement piece, yeah, number one, making sure that people are maybe being a little bit interactive, get their minds working a little bit more, but keeping it short and snappy is, I think we'll all know that you can suffer with a bit of fatigue in the brain, especially if you're slotting things in between the day. Obviously, this is focusing on our RIBA CPD. And Fraser, I think I'd like to ask you the question, as an architect, what are the reasons behind the preference for this from sort of your perspective at all?
Yeah, I think David sort of touched on a lot of this in his report, and I think it's been captured quite well, actually. And I think it's true that, you know, I think the RIBA accredited CPDs do help you stay up to date and current with you know, latest statutory or regulatory requirements that other companies are following in order to meet those requirements, ensuring that they're staying compliant, what they're doing to stay compliant. I think, you know, staying up to speed with how organizations are keeping up to speed with design, construction, new technologies, innovation, you know, and like you say, you've got the kind of stamp of approval that the RIBA have looked over this material, they have approved it. It is information that can be taken on board and trusted. And I think that's certainly a big benefit. And especially as we go into conversations that are becoming more topical, more current, carbon conversations, the conversations around fire safety. I think a lot of CPDs that we certainly have now certainly touch on that, even if the CPD isn't necessarily orientated to that. So everyone's focusing in on how they're being sustainable, how they're being material efficient, how they're being energy efficient. And it's good that the RIBA have certainly looked over that content and ensured that information again can be trusted.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the introductions to the Portal changes the other day, and I think it must be a nightmare, I suppose, really, for a specifier having to keep up to date with everything. So making sure that that's assessed and validated efficiently can only be a help, I assume. Joni, we've talked about how the relationships can be built up through delivering CPD. Obviously, somebody can go in, they can deliver a CPD to someone, but then that's been done. How often should manufacturers consider updating CPDs or introducing new ones? I'm thinking from a perspective of just retaining that engagement with the target audience.
Well, I think that, thank you, Lee. Definitely you should be updating your CPD regardless every couple of years, because the statutory and regulatory information changes on a regular basis. There may be new technical innovations and enhancements you want to talk about. And there are fairly major changes coming over the horizon in the industry as a result of the Grenfell Tower fire 5 years ago. So you need to keep your CPD up to date and fresh anyway. But the bonus of updating it, besides making sure that it's always safe and accurate and informed, and delegates are getting up-to-date information, is that when you do update something or revise something, it appears again on RIBACPD.com as new content, and it's also promoted as such in our monthly RIBA CPD showcase newsletter that goes to around 45,000 specifiers. So people will be seeing that you've got something new to say, and they may be inviting you back as a result of it. But they're also confident that you're taking steps to make sure that its specifications that may arise out of having sat through that piece of material are safe and informed and cover all the relevant areas. But I think that also presenting the same thing over many years must get stale for you as well. So you've got to be engaged and excited with what you're doing. And no company sits still over many years. So there must be some exciting things that you want to talk about in your CPD that weren't there when 2017, 2018, 2019, when the material was first approved. So keep it fresh for you, keep it fresh for the audience, keep it fresh for us.
Brilliant. I think that it sounds a little bit like the musician that has the one big hit and the crowd just wants them to keep playing that. It's nice to keep innovating and keep your material fresh, so it keeps you engaged, and I suppose that delivery will come across then as well, and the passion that you're doing that with. David, my time as a manufacturer, I was fortunate to work for really big, large companies that had whole teams that would go out and deliver CPDs. But from being on the other side of the fence for the past 4 years with MBS, some SMEs do note that they've struggled with resource to go out and deliver these. Do you think digital is the resolution to that problem in this particular case?
I think it can certainly help from some of the things that I've heard providers say, and just thinking about the opportunities for how you can deliver digital. Obviously you've got to create the content, although as Joni was saying earlier, you perhaps can sometimes do that as part of the content that you would have been delivering face to face anyway, or maybe repurpose it rather than completely start again. But once you have created it, then if you're not able to employ a dedicated specialist to deliver your CPD, then you can deliver it to a lot more people without having to travel the distance necessarily that you need to. If it's on demand, you don't even have to actually deliver it again, because obviously you can just make it available. If it is live, okay, so you are presenting it again, but you haven't got that time either side of sort of traveling and resource to do that, which is time out of the office, the expense of train fares or traveling by car, or even accommodation, depending on how far away you're going. So I think I think it can provide a lot of opportunities and help people that don't have that dedicated resource. For things like webinar presentations or potentially podcasts, and as Joni mentioned earlier. Just a quick stat on that, actually 29% of people in the survey did say they like to do CPD via podcast. So it's one of the formats some people quite like. So yes, I think it is an opportunity for people who don't have that dedicated resource to reach more people in different places.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm just conscious of the time, and I know people have got busy days to get ahead to. So one final question, and then I'll just open it up to any sort of closing comments if you do have some. And Joni, I know you've sort of touched on this at the moment, and Fraser's mentioned about sustainability, fire safety, etc., being a big topic at the moment. Are the current industry changes providing more opportunities to deliver CPD, say for building safety as an example?
Oh, I think there's absolutely a question. I think the answer is in two parts. Yes, it provides opportunity in terms of the specific content you present to fit in with the changes for building safety, fire safety, changes to the building regulations that might be pertinent to the safe design and specification using your product and the installation of your product. But the other part of it is that for RIBA, for RIBA, as part of our assessment criteria for very many years, have required that manufacturers, particularly with higher risk products, refer to what we call the certain specification essentials in order for the material to be able to be approved, in turn, in order for it to enable safe and informed specifications. So the things that we've always asked for are health and safety information, fire safety information, certification information, fire testing and fire safety certification, but also clear and transparent environmental performance declarations. So our message to specifiers is that CPD Providers Network content will help lead to those safe and informed specifications. Our message for you as manufacturers is that we work with you to ensure that your content reflects that information, which in turn you can take to specifiers as a trusted piece of information. Now, as mentioned before, the Grenfell Tower fire happened 5 years ago. 72 people died, and a number of changes are just on the horizon. The Building Safety Bill was just enacted as Building Safety Act. Product safety information is coming into focus, and certain building regulations have changed. So these things need to be integrated into your content. You will need to reflect on these in your content, but it also gives you an opportunity to show that you have the right content for specifiers facing those difficult decisions and wanting trusted content to enable those safe and informed specification decisions. Was that okay?
Yeah, thanks very much. And I think just a quick note, anybody that's listening, we've got a load of different webinars available on demand on the mbs.com, but we actually ran one with, and this is on the theme of sustainability and clear, unambiguous information on that, on greenwashing with the Competition and Markets Authority, who actually have a green claims guide that seems to have gone under the radar of a lot of manufacturers. So feel free to take a look at that, free to access and download. We come up to the sort of the end of the time for this session. Been absolutely fantastic chatting to everyone, and I think the conversation could have easily gone on much longer. But just to wrap up, is there any closing comments from each of you or a bit of advice or something that you could maybe close with? Joni, shall we go to you first as the CPD Oracle?
Well, people continue to need CPD. It's mandatory not only for architects, for other construction professionals, including a few of the engineering professions are looking at auditing as well as the RIBA does as well. And the Architects Registration Board, who is our regulatory body in the UK, also announced an increased focus on architects' competence, including doing CPD and having CPD record available. So there's a ready audience for you, but a ready audience who are looking for good, trusted, assessed content that will enable, as I say again, safe and informed specification decisions. We are here to support you. The NBS team is here to support you as well. If you have thinking of taking the plunge, have a chat, and we can help you get over the line.
Thanks very much, Joni. Fraser, anything from yourself?
I suppose I'd just like to reinforce what David and Joni have touched on, which is, you know, hybrid presentations and the importance of them, especially as more offices like ourselves are adopting flexible working. I think flexible working, ever since the pandemic, is here to stay. I think more people want it. More people want the ability to go to the office, go at home, and they still want access to this kind of material, and they still want to be part of the presentations, no matter where they are, no matter where the presentations are taking place. So I think just that consideration of that digital and physical blend of presentation is definitely something to be factored into every presentation.
There we go. You've heard it from the architect's mouth direct. That's great. Thanks very much. And David, last but not least, anything from yourself?
I don't think a huge amount to add, really. I think really just those things we've been coming back to quite a lot about, that hybrid working that Fraser's just mentioned, and the blend of both formats seems really important. And I think as well, in terms of content, those things we've just kind of ended on about sort of the implications of building safety, you know, regulatory issues, sustainability, those things continually come back in the research that we do. It'll be interesting to see what people say the next time we do this in 2 years' time. You know, how things are at that point and where we're at with the kind of whole hybrid working and face-to-face versus digital sort of way of doing things.
Sure. And just as a reminder, if anybody wants to view the report, how do they access this? Yes,
so they can find it on our website nice and easily. The link is actually in my presentation as part of the webinar, so people are viewing it, they'll be able to see the link there. But yes, they can go to it. I'm just trying to find the link now.
It's one of the clearest websites I've ever seen, so yeah, it's easy to find things.
We have a great UI team.
Yeah, Jennifer's saying she's going to post it afterwards.
Ah, great. There we go. So yeah, Jennifer will post the link in the follow-up email. But if you visit the mbs.com, it's there. You can quite easily find it. I think it's probably 1 or 2 clicks to get access to it. On that note then, to the panel, thank you very, very much. Joni, no doubt we'll see you again soon. And Fraser, thanks for giving the time out of your day. It's really appreciated. And David, thank you. And obviously congratulations on the report, because it's a great piece of work.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks.
And thanks to Jennifer in the background.
So I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, learned a little bit more around CPD and how it's changing. And obviously the panel, very, very knowledgeable, had a lot of information to share there with you. Just going to wrap up and summarize now with some of the key findings, and then let everybody get on with the rest of the day. So some of the key takeaways, the things that stuck out for me the most really was CPD can be a valuable tool in building relationships with specifiers. It can help lead to more accurate specifications and the trust, etc., that comes within that. But there's obviously considerations about keeping your content up to date, etc., and keeping it fresh. So people will keep coming time and time again. How your CPD is delivered, must consider new ways of working. I think the key theme that I got from the report, and definitely everything that came out of the panel discussion, just as that hybrid delivery is something that you really, really need to consider. There's obviously other ways and means that you can do things, particularly around the digital delivery, with things like podcasts, white papers, etc., that Joni and the rest of the panel were discussing. But as a minimum, your standard presentation, consider the hybrid delivery method and that. And then obviously the ins and outs of the technology to make sure you've got a decent microphone, etc., so people can actually hear you and it comes across okay. For any of the SMEs that are listening in particular, or people that are have minimal staff, I suppose, really, that can go out and deliver CPDs generally, having digital delivery can entirely remove that barrier, really. If you've recorded something once, that you haven't physically got to go out and do that. So this could potentially be a barrier that's removed that could open up a whole avenue to a whole new set of customers for you. So think about that. Definitely something that I would recommend and consider. And yeah, the digital delivery has got a very, very broad reach and can be accessed at any time. And then last but not least, providing CPD content on topics that are in demand will be a benefit. We've been sort of mentioning this in quite a few of the webinars recently within MBS, but Joni, Fraser, etc. just mentioned this as well. The key changes around the building legislations in respect to building safety, obviously high on people's agenda to learn and get information about, particularly when things are niche and they can have high risks involving them. I think it's definitely something to consider. But also sustainability can quite often be overlooked by manufacturers in certain areas. But definitely needs to be something that you factor in. And I think going back to the RIBA core curriculum, which was in the early slides of the presentation, something like technology in construction, etc., has got quite a high presence of CPD material in it. Sitting in content within other elements of that helps you to become more visible through a lesser pool of content. So plenty of things to factor in there, and hopefully it'll help you increase your CPD prospects. That said, if anybody'd like to know more, you can visit the mbs.com/manufacturers or drop us a note at the contact details there. One of the team would be happy to chat with you. If you are new to MBS or considering CPD or anything else that you've seen today, feel free to drop us a note. We'd be more than happy to arrange a one-to-one session with you and discuss any of the sort of specialist areas in the digital marketing activities that the MBS can help with you. But without any more content, I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. We do appreciate you giving your time of day to actually sit and listen to these things, and we genuinely hope you found it useful. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.